I take care of the forest by removing waste, and the forest takes care of me by providing me with Amanita Muscaria. It's a lovely relationship. Hello my friends of the Psychedelic Renaissance, it's Tom Hatzis, your psychedelic historian, and this is Protocols for Safely Foraging and Consuming the Amanita Muscaria.
Part 2.
As I mentioned in part 1, I was inspired to make this video series after reading a couple of articles about Amanita Muscaria candies that were being sold at gas stations. But it wasn't just those articles, I should say. There is actually a litany of very poorly researched info out there about the Amanita Muscaria coming to us in blog posts, articles, and videos, made by people more interested in sensationalizing the issue and making themselves look cool and subversive than actually having or showing any kind of respect or desire to truly understand this mushroom. In my last video, I discussed why buying Amanita Muscaria candies from gas stations is probably not a very good idea, and I also tackled the question of whether or not the Amanita Muscaria is psychedelic, because as I said in that video, it's the question I get asked more than any other question in any other area of psychedelia. Today I'd like to go over some varieties of the Amanita Muscaria, note the deadly lookalikes, and discuss proper cleaning and storage techniques of the mushroom. But first, if you're into this kind of content, please give this video a like and a share, subscribe to the channel, and find me on Instagram at Psychedelic Historian. Let's start with the beginning. The name, and I probably should have included this in the first video, but here we are. The name Amanita Muscaria comes from the mid-1700s when Carolus Linnaeus combined the ancient Greek word for mushroom, amanita, with the ancient Latin word for fly, musca, giving us the name the Amanita Muscaria, which is why that mushroom is also known as the fly agaric or the fly mushroom. But why the fly agaric specifically? Like, why not the ant agaric or the beetle agaric? The idea holds that the mushroom served as a medieval form of pest control. So you'd find the mushroom, you would chop it up, and you'd put it in a bowl or a dish of milk, and flies would be attracted to the milk, but then the ibotenic acid from the mushroom would sort of seep into the milk and kill the fly. The earliest I could trace this lore comes from the mid-13th century with the German theologian Albertus Magnus when he wrote, "It is called the fly mushroom because if pulverized and put in milk, it kills flies." Now I should say there is one tiny problem with this explanation, and that's that, this whole thing doesn't actually work at all. The French mycologist Pierre Bouillard in the mid-1700s actually tested it and found that putting Amanita Muscaria in milk to attract and kill flies is just a great way to waste your Amanita Muscaria. The Amanita Muscaria comes in a number of varieties that can be found all over the United States, Canada, and pretty much completely blanket Western Europe. So while we find both the Amanita Muscaria and the Amanita formosa in the Pacific Northwest, we are unlikely to come across the Amanita persicana, which typically grows in the southeast from like Louisiana all the way to Tennessee. You'll have no doubt noticed that a lot of them look quite similar. Now obviously the Amanita Muscaria has the bright red cap, you can't mistake it for anything else, but even the Amanita formosa, it still has that Amanita look to it, even though the cap isn't specifically that bright red color. I would also like to say, as somebody who works with all kinds of Amanita that I can find and that are psychoactive and edible, I have not noticed much of a difference at all between the Amanita formosa and the Amanita Muscaria so far as its mind-altering capabilities are concerned. Best to just check your local forests or Google it or ask like a park ranger or something to find out what varieties of Amanita grow near you. With the Amanita Muscaria, it's all about forming a long-term relationship. One of the best ways to begin this relationship is to forage the mushroom yourself. So we're going to get a little witchy now as we explore my process of collecting that most healing, beautiful, magically enchanting mushroom, the Amanita Muscaria. Once you've checked out what kinds of varieties grow near your area, you're going to want to know what kind of forests to specifically look in. Amanita Muscaria grows in diverse ecosystems, specifically boreal forests where both coniferous trees like spruce, fir, and pine, and deciduous trees like oak and birch coexist. Before I begin foraging, the very first thing I do is clean up the litter, should there be any, in the surrounding area. One of the more disheartening things about foraging is going out into the woods and seeing an empty can of Pepsi just on the ground of the forest. It's like, it sucks. So bring a garbage bag with you and seriously, like, pick up the trash. I know it's not yours and you didn't put it there, but I guarantee you the forest is going to thank you. With the litter sufficiently cleaned, I then say a prayer to the natural intelligence of the forest, giving thanks for all she is going to provide. I take care of the forest by removing waste, and the forest takes care of me by providing me with Amanita Muscaria. It's a lovely relationship. One of the more important things to remember when foraging is that different mushrooms that you find are going to be different levels of, let's just say, dirty. Some of them are going to have pine needles on them, or dirt, or whatever. I learned the hard way the first time I went foraging that it is imperative to clean off each mushroom before putting them in your basket or your bag. The first time I foraged Amanita Muscaria about 8 years ago, I was so excited and naive that I was just willy-nilly throwing the mushrooms in my basket, whether they were dirty or clean, and you can imagine what happens after walking around a forest for a few hours with dirty mushrooms in a basket. Well, suddenly they're all dirty mushrooms now. The dirt and the pine needles, everything, they just spread everywhere. My business partner Eden and I, later that night, spent untold, I mean literally countless hours cleaning off those mushrooms. So learn from my mistake. Clean each mushroom before putting it in your basket or your bag. Your future self is going to thank you. Perhaps the most important part about understanding any mushroom, whether the Amanita Muscaria or otherwise, is knowing how to spot the deadly lookalikes. Most seasoned and even novice foragers will tell you that mushrooms come with a host of lookalikes that will kill you if you eat them. Now, what I personally love about the Amanita Muscaria that you will not find with the psilocybe mushrooms, there are no deadly lookalikes. Now, that's not to say that there are not deadly Amanita varieties. I mean, there's tons of them. However, let's take a look at some of them and ask ourselves, what do they all seem to have in common? Here's the Amanita phalloides, the Amanita virosa, the Amanita ocreata, the Amanita bisporigera, the Amanita abrupta, and the Amanita araucii. As you no doubt noticed, none of those deadly lookalikes resemble the proper Amanita Muscaria, whose cap can range from a golden yellow to an orange to red, again depending on its Formosa or Amanita gasawi, but they're never pale white like that. Only the deadly ones are pale white like that. And while the Amanita phalloides has more of a dirty, piss yellow color, not white, and the Amanita gasawi also has a yellowish cap, still there are differences between them. Let's put them side by side on screen right now so that you can see that even though they both have yellowish caps, they are still so very different looking. The phalloides does not have the white flecks on the top, and again, the yellow color is more of like a dirty piss yellow than the golden yellow of the Amanita gasawi. Now, the closest you'll get to a mushroom that grows in similar conditions as the Amanita Muscaria and has a somewhat similar look as the Amanita Muscaria, but actually isn't an Amanita at all, is the Russula emetica. From a distance, the Russula can look like an Amanita Muscaria, especially if insects have eaten away at the cap, because it can cause it to make it look like it has white flecks on the top. But please note that the Russula does not have the bulb at the bottom or the universal veil. Now, eating the Russula emetica is not going to kill you. However, both your toilet and your spouse are going to be very upset with you. However, once you've been out foraging for a little bit, I guarantee you will be able to spot the differences between the Russula emetica and the Amanita Muscaria without much difficulty at all. Once I get home, I separate the three parts of the mushroom: stems with stems, caps with caps, bulbs with bulbs. The reason I do this is that each one of those parts has a different amount of ibotenic acid in it. And remember, ibotenic acid is what converts to muscimol, which is the good stuff. That's what we want during the dehydration process. Now, since the cap has the most ibotenic acid in it, that's what I use mostly for my entheogenic mushroom rituals. The stems don't have much ibotenic acid in them at all, so I'm going to tell you in a moment what I do with those. And the bulb has a nice amount of ibotenic acid in it as well, which I use for sleeping and dream divination. Since the stems have the least amount of ibotenic acid in them, they make for a great culinary dish. But since they do have some ibotenic acid in them, we have to get rid of it. Since ibotenic acid is water soluble, what I do is I take my stems and I put them just in a pot of water and put it in the fridge, and then change out the water every 8 hours or so for about 2 days. That clears the stems of the majority of the ibotenic acid. Then throw them in a frying pan with some butter and garlic, fry them up, and they are absolutely delectable. As for the caps and bulbs, I chop them up, put them in the dehydrator, set the dehydrator to 165 degrees, go to sleep, wake up the next morning, and I have fresh, crisp Amanita Muscaria. Last thing I'd like to go over is storing your mushrooms now. Now, some people will put them in plastic bags, whatever like that. Honestly, it drives me insane when people do that. Look, entheogens have a spirit to them, and just as much as you probably don't want somebody putting a plastic bag over your head, Amanita Muscaria doesn't want to be in plastic either. So, way to store them is in a mason jar with a salt pack. Keep them out of the sun, so if you have a basement or a closet, attic, anything like that, that'll be great. Now, I've heard from actually my friend and colleague, Baba Masha, who wrote the book Microdosing with Amanita Muscaria. She believes that the mushroom has a shelf life of about 6 to 9 months. I just want to say, with all love to Baba Masha and all respect to her, I very much disagree with that. I actually took some Amanita last night in tea form that's from last season, from the fall of 2024, and it worked just fine. So don't be so quick to get rid of your Amanita Muscaria just because you reach like the 7, 8, 9, or 10 month mark, because they're probably still good. And here's the deal. If you really want to get rid of them, if you don't want them, don't throw them out, just give them to me, because I'll eat them. And I should say real quick, nothing about putting mushrooms or any entheogen in plastic diminishes its potency. It simply doesn't. What I'm talking about here is having a relationship with this mushroom, and that precludes putting it in plastic. At least for me. Well, my friends, that's all I have for you this time, and I'd love to thank you for stopping by. If you found value in this content, please give this video a like and a share, subscribe to the channel, and let's link up on Instagram. And until we meet again, I'm Tom Hatsis, your psychedelic historian, reminding you that you free your mind by using your brain. Peace.